Today we're going to talk about pricing and fashion business models and how pricing works into a fashion business model. It's a very important part of the production process and of any company model. I know pricing, as viewed by a designer standpoint, may not be one of the most interesting things, and some of us might recoil at the thought of putting a price tag on our beautiful creations. But of course it must be done, and will determine much how our business is going to be run and also the success of our business. So let's dive on into it and talk about what pricing is. So pricing refers to the practice of setting a monetary cost of your product. So how much will your garment cost? Obviously each garment will have its own unique and individual needs, but be based within the price point range and market of your company. And when we do pricing, we set both the wholesale market and the retail market price. And a lot of factors are considered when pricing garments in the fashion industry. Of course, as I was mentioning, each garment is a unique individual item, and so will receive a unique individual cost. But the most important factors when it comes to pricing are the production costs. So this is the cost associated with making the garment and includes all of the fabric, notions, design, and labor associated with producing that garment. There's also the value proposition and customer segmentation factors. And these are the micro aspects of a fashion business. So value proposition is what attracts your customer base to buy your clothes. And customer segmentation is basically your target market, or the person to whom your clothing is designed specifically for. Other factors will include broader market trends, which include trends within established markets that companies design within, and also other sort of macroeconomic strategies in pricing and business model. So let's first look at production costs. So production costs, again, add up all of the costs the design company has to pay in order to make its clothing. They will include material cost, labor cost, and the design cost, including some other additional costs. The material cost, of course, is the cost of all the material, fabric, trims, notions, zippers, hardware, things like that, and all other physical items that will go into the making of the garment. The labor cost is the cost of cutting, sewing, and any other human task needed in the production of the garments. So if any particular activity, like say beading or hand stitching or any other application like that, will go into labor costs. Basically anything that a human does to put your garment together. There's also the design cost. This can include pattern making, but the design and market research, design development and creation, along with other design related costs. Production costs, material costs. So step one to finding out your production cost is to find out how much material your garments need. So this step is pretty much done after the fabric has been sourced for a production line, and after the sample garments have been made, or at least after the initial patterns for the sample garments have been made. Once you have a pattern for a particular garment, you can find out how much material you would need to make that garment. So to do that, what one does is one lays out all of the pattern pieces, as shown here, onto a piece of folded fabric intended for the garment. Now, it's folded as if you were going to cut it. So see here, it is folded selvage edge to selvage edge, probably face sides together with this length grain fold running down this edge here. And this should look very familiar to anyone who has made a garment before, because this is how we lay out and fold our fabric when we cut a singular pattern to be made. And what it allows us to do is, once we have the pattern piece laid out on this folded piece of fabric, we can measure how much yardage is needed to make that garment. So what we do when we arrange our pattern pieces is we try to squish them together as much as possible. This, of course, allows us to not waste any fabric. And of course, we want to use as little fabric as possible to create each garment. So we try our best to sort of arrange the pattern pieces in the most efficient layout without taking up additional unneeded fabric space. Once the pattern is laid out, we'll go ahead and measure from the pattern start or edge of the fabric over here along the folded fabric till it ends. Now, this fabric in this illustration has been cut right where it ends, but it could go on further depending on, how much sample yardage we have. But what we want to do is we want to measure essentially this space shown here. So that is the fabric that is being taken up by the pattern. We'll measure the distance along this edge. That distance is the yardage needed to make a garment. Now, this task will be repeated for any contrasting or alternative fabrics used in the garment, say lining or contrasting colors or different things like that. So this would be how we find out the total cost of materials associated with producing a garment. So let's take this skirt as a little bit of an example. Over here we have all of the materials and their costs associated with this skirt. So let's break it down one by one. First, we have the black fabric. We need 2 yards to create this skirt. Those 2 yards are priced at $2 a yard. So this black fabric will cost $4 to create this skirt. So the cost of this black fabric will be $4 to create the skirt. The pink fabric down here is another contrasting fabric. Only about a half a yard is needed for this skirt. It's priced at the same amount, $2 a yard, and will cost us $1 per garment in that material. Now I also have these lovely little flower appliques, and let's say that we are buying them and attaching them. We need 6 of them, as we can see here. They're priced at 50 cents a piece, and that will total to $3 in flower appliques for this garment. We also have a lovely pink drawstring right here. Let's say it's 1 yard of pink cord needed at $1 per yard will cost us $1. Now we also have an other cost down here. So what is that? Well, these are the main, oops, sorry about that. Let me go back. Oops. Sorry, guys. So what is the other cost for? Well, I don't see anything else in here. Well, as people who have made garments before, we know that there are other things in there. There's the thread. There might be interfacing. There might be small zippers, hook and eyes, all these tiny little details that aren't really very expensive and are used in such a way where trying to quantify the amount needed is a very difficult and tedious task. So what we'll do is we'll just tack on an additional flat rate for all those other items. Again, all those other items could be thread, hook and eyes, zippers, elastics, sometimes interfacing if you're not costing out interfacing the same way you're doing lining or something like that. And we're just going to tack it all on in a additional 50 cents to encompass all of those aggregate smaller costs, which again would be pretty hard and pretty tedious to sort of quantify and measure per garment. So here's all of our materials listed out. We add them all up and we can find that the total material cost for this skirt is $9.50 in materials. Once all of those materials has been sourced and listed out, this is typically when we start to fill out a cost sheet. So a cost sheet is a chart that a company uses to list out, document, and organize all of the material costs relative to a garment or if you're working in another industry, whatever product the company is producing. Every company will have its own format for cost sheets, but they will typically include the information on the fabric trims notion used in the garment, other information for the garment like size ranges, offered, season, style numbers, etc. Now, we say size ranges. I just want to make a particular note here because it is very common for fashion companies to sometimes create different cost sheets for different size ranges. This being that the smaller range of sizes, maybe your extra smalls to your mediums, will require less fabric and have a lower material cost than your larger sizes, say your larges to extra larges. Sometimes this is even transferred into the final price where very large sized garments will be priced higher. A cost sheet may detail the full production cost of a single garment and include the price for labor to sew one unit, a factor aimed to recognize the cost of design or other services rendered in the production of the garment. So again, the cost sheet, especially for fashion, is going to focus mainly on the material costs, but also can include additional costs to reach a total full production cost. And of course that would include labor cost, design costs, and other associated services. These are what some examples of cost sheets look like, okay? So here we have a working one in here. There's typically a header up here which will have the general information associated with the garment. Now each cost sheet is made for each garment. Different colorways might be included within the same cost sheet, but typically cost sheets are relevant only to a singular garment and even sometimes more specifically to a specific garment size range. So the header includes dates, names of the company, season, a style number for the garment, typically a description, and other sorts of things. Here we have all of our material cost on the cost sheet on the left. We have all of the fabrics used in a garment, their quantity used, the price, and so the overall cost. So we see here that this silk organza in midnight navy, it needs 1.5 meters. They're using imperial, that's fine. Meter is very close to a yard. The price is 260 RS. I'm not quite sure what unit of currency that is. Might be RS. Let me see. It's not a ruble. Rupee. Ruble. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Let me know. So totaling the price for the silk organza would be 390. So 1.5 times 260 equals 390. We do this for all the other materials. We also have some trims and notion. So this actually looks like it does try to quantify sewing thread, which is actually fairly rare to do on a cost sheet. Again, it's usually tacked on with other costs. This might be sort of just a general tack on too for thread and zipper. So again, they're kind of itemizing each one of their other categories out. They're being a little bit more organized. But again, companies will sort of take things like little zippers and threads and stuff and sort of just tack them on into a, a one flat rate that they tack on to every garment. Now they also have labor, which they're calling workmanship. Right here, the transportation costs, so costs associated with transporting various fabrics or garments to and from factories to retail stores, things like that. They also have a finishing and packing. So that would be, if they got shipped back to the design company and they were put in particular packages, put their hang tags on, put any sort of final tags or labels on it. That might be ironed or steamed or presented before they're sent out or shipped out, different things like that. So down here they are showing the total production costs right here, because that again is including all of our different factors and their markup and what they are going to be selling it for. Now here is a standardized cost sheet that you can find on the internet, made for fashion designers, or at least to make the documentation for fashion designers a little bit easier. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, because your assignment relating to this video and this lesson will involve this cost sheet quite heavily, but we'll get to that at the end. So once we have determined our material cost, determined our labor cost and other various costs, and completed our cost sheet, we can decide how much a garment is going to cost the company to produce. And here is a short list listing some of the factors that might be included in the total cost of production. Again, every company's cost for production will vary slightly depending on how they get things done. So total materials cost, of course, we figured out was going to be $9.50 from that little chart before. Total labor cost, this would be to sew one garment, because right now when we're finding the total production cost, we're finding it of one unit or one garment. So it's going to take cost the company $10 to have that garment cut and sewn together. We might also tack on different services that were incurred in producing this garment. So here I have size grading. So a lot of companies will outsource their size grading, which means when they make their sample garment, they'll typically make it in a medium size, or the most middle size that they're offering. It might not be exactly a medium, but if you take a very simple example of small, medium, large, it certainly would be a small. But of course we typically offer many more sizes, so we take the one that sort of sits right in the middle. We figure out the pattern for that, and then what we might do is send that pattern to another company, a third-party company that offers services, pattern making services like grading. And when we grade, we take that middle pattern and we apply a series of pattern making techniques to create the other sizes. Now the reason that we pick the middle size is because there is a slight sort of distortion for every time you grade out from the original. So little details will get slightly skewed or out of place. So to sort of maintain and mitigate that, what we do is we start from a middle size, so we don't have to go too many iterations away from the original. For example, if we started from a size small, I would have to make one sort of graded copy to a medium, or let's say extra small. We're starting with the extra small. One graded copy for the small, then another graded copy off that to a medium, then another graded copy off that to a large, then another graded copy off that to the extra large. And by the time we get that many iterations away from the original, some detail distortion can occur. It's like taking a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It slightly deteriorates every single time. So again, to avoid that, we start in the middle, so we're never going too far from the original. Likely, many companies opt to get a marker service. Now, we talked a little bit about what a marker is in the industry overview lesson. And remember, the marker is an arrangement of every pattern piece that will be cut out of a specific type of pattern. And that arrangement is made algorithmically through an algorithmic nesting program to specifically designed to reduce the use of excess fabric. So basically what it does is it takes all those many pattern pieces out of different sizes, even potentially different garments, just so long as they're all going to be cut out of that same fabric, and it arranges them in these highly complicated layouts or drafts of many pieces, and they're squished together to utilize the least amount of fabric possible. And of course, it is typically, if a company does not have the capability of creating a marker on their own, a service that is worth their cost. Again, if they can save even just a little bit of fabric on a very large run, it will typically end up saving the company much more money than the marker services actually cost. So that is why most companies, whether they do it in-house or they purchase third-party services to do it, will also do that. Will also try to make a marker. Then there are also design costs. And the design costs could be related to how much the company has spent on design research, on designers themselves, so paying your potential salary, in addition to other costs which might be present here, like we saw before on the other speccing sheet. There might be transportation costs and other finishing costs and things like that. Advertising costs as well. But to keep it simple, we're going to come and we're going to keep it right down here. These are the costs that our company associates with the total production cost. So design costs, will break it down into $1 per garment. Again, this is sort of aggregate, so these are not the total cost of getting a size upgraded. This is not the total cost of having a marker made. This is not the total cost of paying your designers. What it is it's an estimate. Say size grading costs X amount of money, but we're going to sell Y amount of garments. So we take that X and divide it by Y, and then we get the cost associated per garment. So the total cost of size grading divided by the amount of garments that we produce will give us a rough estimate toward the individual price that the grading had per garment. Okay? Same with your design costs and marker costs. So that is your production costs, but there are different factors associated in determining a final price. Although our production cost is probably the most important factor because it lets us know basically the bottom of where we can start to price. If we start to price things below our actual production cost, we will be losing money, so we don't want to do that. So it kind of sets the floor. But other things exist to affect our pricing, and they all fall into the category of what type of business model a fashion company might fall into. So let's take a look at some of the things that define a fashion business model. There are the micro factors, or small and unique factors relating to a company. They will include value proposition and customer segmentation. So what is value proposition? Well, it's a fancy marketing term, and it means what you offer that your customer really wants and your competition can't provide. Now, here's a little Venn diagram sort of explaining what a company's unique value proposition is. So what they can offer to a customer that no one else can, that is unique and singular to them. And it sort of lies within the field of what the company does really well, what the customer wants, and what your competition can't do. Now, I said this does really well, but you see this is the area that's not overlapping with this. So here is the items that your basically you and your competition are in equal value to your customer. You have no advantage over your competition right there in the center of the circle. But in this area where what your customer needs and what you do well, but your competition can't do, is what you uniquely offer to your customer. And that is really how much value you can put on that will make a difference in how you price your goods and how much you can price your goods for. So this value of garments or of a product are not just in their style, fabric, and construction, but also in how they perform technically and psychologically for the customer. So let's take a look at that. So every product sort of has a base value, and it's simply initially a product that interests our customer. So it just has to be a product, and it has to be of use and function to our customer. Obviously, we can't add or create any value on a product or garment that our customer does not want. And again, the garment is made from materials that our customer can accept, is a style that is desirable and is available to our customer. So just being there, being acceptable, and being acceptably stylish to our customer would be its base value. And we can see this as not putting our brand or even our specific company. It's really the base value of the product itself. So how much value does, let's say, a pair of jeans have to our target customer? Or how much does just a generalized garment have within a market and target market to its customers? Now we also have what's called added value. Now, in addition to our base value, we can add additional value to our garments. And there's really two ways we can do that. And the first is to meet the technical needs of the customer. Many customers need their garments to have highly technical capabilities. If a company can fulfill these technical needs better than other companies, this will add value to the garment. So here I have illustrated a number of highly technical garments used in specialized fields. We have a runner, we have a skier, we have a swimsuit, we have a waiter outfit, and a dancer's uniform. Obviously, all of these garments need to perform certain tasks when the wearer has them on. We need to be aerodynamic, or we need to be safe from the elements, we need to be dry. They need to be of strong, durable construction that can hold up to movement and beatings and abrasions and things like that. So built strong, built tough, built to move, and built to aid the customer in these specialized pursuits. Now, these are very extreme examples in all cases, but this can sort of trickle down into lower fashionable, into other sort of markets as well. They don't need to be quite so highly technical. So you might not need the most advanced running uniform in the world to make you as aerodynamic, as free in movement. It doesn't need to wick sweat off you as soon as possible, but you might need something for the gym that, looks good on you and allows you to move and is going to hold up after quite a few squats and things like that. So, it doesn't need to be the, again, most technical thing in the world. These are all variations depending on what your customer needs and how your customer needs it to perform, either on a very high scale or very low scale. And this, again, will depend on, what the customer is doing in your clothing. Again, if they are a competitive runner, it is highly important that their garments are highly technical and reach these very, very high performance capabilities, because of course they're racing, it's their competition, it's their life. There's a lot of value in getting a garment that will perform flawlessly even under the most brutal conditions. But if you're just a jogger, you don't need it to perform quite as highly, and so on and so forth. So depending on where your customer sits and what they need of it, this can have a sort of sliding scale of added value. It can also have a sliding scale of cost too. So if we think about that, these garments also, so if we take into consideration our materials cost, obviously looking at this as a perspective of pricing, are going to be made out of higher quality materials. They're going to have higher craftsmanship in their construction, and they're also going to have much higher design related costs. Again, because the costs related in these designs aren't just going to be a sketch here and there, but might involve, material science, developing new fabric that breathes better, is antimicrobial, is insulative, is stretchier, is stronger, is more water resistant or stain resistant. In addition to, again, in the process of design, we have to, again, be designing things that function. So testing the functionality of these garments is going to take longer, be more intensive, and cost more money. All of that will cause these garments to be at a higher price because of their higher production costs. But again, as their capabilities improve, so does the added value to the customer. So they can justify charging more for the garment. Next we have more added value, but this time we have emotional and psychological needs of the customer. So fashion brands add value to their clothing by use of what's called emotional branding. Now, emotional branding refers to a brand's attempt to align themselves with their customers' emotional and psychological needs and aspirations. So this is sort of everything else that gets attached to clothing. I like to call it the fantasy aspect of fashion. So many designers will basically tell you that designing is basically creating fantasies, creating people's fantasies. And depending on who your customer is, their fantasies will change or be different, and so your brand needs to identify these fantasies your customers have in order to try to basically convince them that buying your clothes will allow them to live out their fantasies. Now, I know it sounds silly, but it's super effective. So let's look at some of the most common ways that brands use emotional branding to help boost their added value. So here I have a collection of advertisements from fashion design companies that sort of pinpoint some of the most, or at least the four most common emotional branding, I'd say, styles or attachments that companies will have today. Of course, there are many, 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 but these are just some of them. And I chose them again because you see them again and again. So up here in the upper left-hand corner, we have a vintage 90s Abercrombie & Fitch ad. And these ads were pretty much notorious for, well, you can see what for. And again, this is a tried and true advertising strategy. It's basically called the sex appeal strategy. And its intent is to align the brand with being sexy, with being desirable. And of course, this lives out, as you can imagine, many people's fantasy. So if our brand can successfully align with this concept of being super sexy, getting lots of desirable mates and such, then we can have the value added boost for our brand for the sex appeal, which means that customers will buy our clothes not just because they want jeans. This is an ad for jeans, by the way, if you couldn't tell. It is kind of hard to tell. And this is actually, it should maybe go, it's a good little footnote in fashion advertising history. The designers have had, very ingenious marketing teams try to reiterate and rehash, the sex appeal marketing strategy over the decades. And again, in the 90s, Abercrombie & Fitch was fairly notorious for this. And even you think, this shows a lot of skin here, you should see some of the other lads. This is probably one of the more conservative ones that I've found for this PowerPoint. But that's up for you and some little extra research. So again, the fantasy here is I want to be sexy. And that is the value-added brand that companies will use again and again to try to tempt people into buying their clothes. Buy my clothes. You're not just getting a pair of jeans, you're getting an extra boost in your sexiness stats. Over here on the right, we have a Nike ad with, I believe, that is a soccer player from the United States women's soccer team. They win a lot. I'm assuming she just this was taken probably after one of their wins. Nike will take champions and highlight them in their ads, of course using athletics, and align their marketing strategy toward those athletes, and also of this sort of ideal of a healthy, fit winner. So again, they are aligning their brand with strong strength, athleticism, being victorious, things like that. And of course, that's our fantasy of pretty much doing that, being strong, being athletic, being victorious, being the winner, conquering your fears, just do it, getting over it all, and coming and winning the competition, things like that. That is their value added. So, what are they selling here? Are they just selling athletic wear? No, they're selling the idea of, athletic determination, the idea of being healthy, fit, and being a winner. Buy our clothes. It's what winners do. Buy our clothes, and you'll win the game, Again, a lot of this stuff sounds silly. Buy our clothes, you'll get sex. Buy our clothes, you'll win the game. It's silly. But guys, it works. It's been working forever. It still works, and people are still, quote unquote, falling for it. Hey, maybe it will. Maybe you will gain a little bit just from the clothes. We as designers know how much clothes can make a difference. But again, you kind of have to build a fantasy and suspend that disbelief. Oops. Sorry, I keep doing that. Let me go back. Sorry. Here we have an advertisement for a sort of new, smaller designer called Jason Hyde. He makes watches and a few other accessories, but mainly watches. And he creates them using recycled products and boasts being a sustainable fashion company. And this is another value add category of pretty much the feel good about yourself or strong moral ethics. Now, this doesn't have to specifically target eco-conscious advertising or eco-conscious production. This could fall under a lot of different categories. But basically, they are promoting and aligning their company's brand values and brand identity with basically being a good person. They're saying, hey, we're a good company, we're doing good things, and if you buy our clothes, you're a good person too. And again, we'll see this many different times. Very popular today is sort of the eco-conscious one, but we'll see other sorts of socially conscious brands trying to align their company more strongly with these social conscious efforts through different marketing and even sales programs. So another good example of that is Tom's shoe. And this is another interesting footnote that's playing on right now. So Tom's was a shoe startup, and they gained wild popularity and skyrocketed in growth and sales and all the things like that. And they offered a fairly basic shoe, cheaply made with cheap materials, but fairly good quality and pretty comfortable. They're nothing to write home about in design-wise, but fairly standard. But the whole promise was, if you buy a pair of shoes from Tom's, we're going to donate another pair of shoes to a community in need, a quote, community in need. And people really love this idea. Oh, I can buy shoes and I'm helping someone. I'm helping, what would they say? A child from an impoverished third world nation that doesn't have shoes to go to school. I'm buying a pair of shoes for them. That's fantastic. I feel good about myself. And it was wildly successful. And probably one of, if not the most important aspects of their success. However, what's interesting about that footnote is he did deliver. He did ship out all of these different pairs of shoes to different communities. And it was so wildly successful that he was shipping out crates and crates and crates until a lot of these communities got pretty pissed because they have shoemakers of their own. So all these places that started, countries in Africa and South America and things like that, these little communities that were getting basically crates upon crates of shoes, I'm sure the average person was happy with their shoe, but all the shoemakers of these communities went out of business because everyone was getting their shoes for free. So in a lot of ways, he was doing more harm in, hurting the local economy of some of these certain places than he was doing an overall good. So again, if you do want to align yourself with social causes, do try to know what you're doing. Don't be too short-sighted. Try to think about all the aspects, because they're actually coming back with a lot of backlash now. There's a lot of stories coming out. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find it, that all these, shoemakers in Ghana or something are just pissed off at Tom's because he put them out of business. Can't compete with free shoes. Now over here, sorry about my tangent, we have the last sort of very common luxury model, and it is a Chanel ad. And of course we know Chanel as being a luxury brand, and typically our high luxury brands want to align themselves with being expensive and exclusive, a sort of higher class, if you will. And this boosts the "I need people to know that I'm richer than them" value add. So as we know, this is something that people like to try to communicate with others, that they have money, they maybe enjoy finer, more luxury things, and they of course love to utilize fashion in trying to portray this message. Or it might be fantasy, depends on the person. My sort of experience is, I don't know, the flashier the clothing sort of indicates a higher need of people to know that I'm richer than them, which means that they're not really. But anyways, it's up to you on your own observations. But that is certainly the strategy. And we see here in this sort of, Baroque, luxurious, gilded almost interior with a gilded bird cage, and everything looks very luxurious, and even the hairstyle and the decorations and thing harkens back to sort of the French royalty of the Baroque era. So again, these are things that are going to be emphasized, high concept, sort of elitism, stuff like that. That help create this sort of exclusivity associated with a certain brand. And again, that creates the I need people to know that I'm rich, or I want to communicate that I have lots of money value add. Because of course, if you flash a brand and no one associates that brand name with anything, how are they going to know that you paid a whole bunch of money for it? All right, then we also have included within our micro factors is customer segmentation. And this is really just your target market. And fashion brands often create detailed customer profiles based on their ideal customer. And this can include many aspects of a brand's target customer's life. And an example of that is shown on the left. We have an example of a company's target customer profile. It focuses in on sweet little Ziggy Piper, who I'm assuming is a fictional person. They typically are, but sometimes they're given names to sort of humanize them in a way. But we learned that she's 23, she's single, she's living in Austin, she's going to college, she's basically a hippie. Probably goes to Coachella. Let's face it, that looks like a Coachella outfit to me. So we have all these sort of associated traits and aspects: bohemian, hippie, earthy, indie, artsy, unconventional, spiritual, unconventional. She thinks she's unconventional, let's just say that. Bohemian style inspired, that's basically the thing. And then other things that can affect sort of the design creation or the design research that goes into each garment. So if she likes eco-friendly clothing, you might source eco-friendly materials or things like that, or do a thing where a certain percentage of your profits go to a wildlife conservation site, or do a thing where, I don't know, if you like eco-friendly, has eco-friendly messages printed on sustainable material created t-shirts, or something like that. You guys know although these customer profiles can be quite broad, I want to narrow it down to what we're really interested in. Again, this is pricing. So what is most important in pricing from our customer target profile is how much this customer is willing to pay for a product in the market we designed for. So again, this will go into sort of pinpointing the price for our garments. So we have a garment. We have to look at this person. We have to think about not just about how much they actually make or how much money, disposable income they have available to us, but how much do they typically spend on something like this, on a garment like this. And again, as we sort of look at that, we can look how it's sort of stretched. You know, is it something that they're going to want to spend more money on? And you say, why would anyone want to spend more money on something? Well, a lot of people associate price with value. So if our garment is something Piper really needs, little Ziggy Piper really wants and needs, she's going to spend more money on it than normal. Now, if it's something that we're creating that she doesn't really want to spend that much money on, which is still okay. She can still be our target customer. We just have to price accordingly. We have to price according to how much a customer is willing to pay. So, for instance, if we were to take this same customer and price out sort of different garments, let's take something that she might have a lot of need for it to perform. You'd probably perform emotionally or potentially, depending on what she's doing, perform technically. Well, let's take a look at this. What does she really want? What does she really kind of put a lot of emphasis on? Well, she wants to be eco-friendly and earthy and vegetarian. So if we think about it, if we go back to the other value add, we most want to attract Ziggy Piper. Which one of those four sort of strategies are we going to go for? Well, we're probably going to go for that, I have strong moral ethics value add. So we can develop a company, and again, so long as we make sure that we are offering, bohemian chic, just the most bohemian chicness you've ever seen, with just the most eco-friendly fabrics, zero waste fabrics, sustainable fabrics, created in labor factories where everyone gets to also feed rescue tigers, or I don't know, but you get my drift. Then we can charge more for it because she's willing to pay for that, because those are things she needs a lot and she puts a lot of value on. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we can still sell cheap goods to her. So she has a sort of range within her closet, like everyone has a range within her closet of acceptable price points. So take a look at your own closet and you'll see what I mean. You have probably some rather expensive clothing that are meant for formal occasions or really dress up. The things that you're saving, you're probably only going to wear a couple times to, a very important wedding or to, I hate to say a funeral, but a funeral, very special, important occasions like that. Then down the tier, you might have your professional section of your garments that are meant for work, and you spent money on them to look nice and professional, and we need them, of course, to perform to sell the fact that, hey, we are professionals. And we might have our kind of going out clothes, which we might spend a little bit more money on as well, because we want to look sexy, and we want to look trendy, and we want to look cool and fun, and that's probably the most fun garments to buy anyways, is our kind of going out clothes. Remember going out, guys? Anyways. And then as we sort of work down, we have maybe just our casual hanging out, like I'm going to the store, I'm going to the laundromat. It's nothing special, but I don't want to look like a slob. And then they're like, is our slob clothes, which I'm sure we're all wearing right now. It's our Netflix and chill uniforms and things like that. We still have needs for them, but the price point kind of lowers each time you kind of go down on here. And again, it's not that we don't need comfy, cheap clothing to lounge around and watch Netflix during quarantine in. We all have need for that, right? We clearly see the need for that right now. It just means that we're going to price it differently than we are, that great dress we have for a very fancy wedding, or that interview suit we have, the one that's going to guarantee us that we land the job. So on her end of the spectrum, we're going to see probably a little bit more of the casual kind of loungy stuff, I would imagine. I would see, sort of sweatpants, maybe yoga pants, that she's going to want to kind of fill up with cheaper items. And just sort of looking at her, I could probably the lowest but fairly significant price point and market aspect would be cheap accessories. So those cheap little hair bands that, I don't know, I never really got. Necklaces, bracelets, little things. So if we take a look at these probably were all $1 or, very, very low, but she's buying such quantity of them that even though they're a low cost and she wants them at a low cost, she's still a very appropriate customer for that market. So again, even though we have a very specific customer in mind, again, just to reiterate, it is what we want to be extracting from this customer profile when it comes to pricing is how much is this customer willing to pay for a product in the market we design for. All right? And then that's going to sort of help us, again, reach a target cost. And again, this might come first. And then we're going to adjust everything else to fit this. So if we need it to be a certain cost, we're going to be sourcing fabrics of a certain price. We know we can't source fabrics above a certain limit. We know we can't source labor above a certain limit, so on and so forth. It's actually much more common to do it that way than the other way around. Now we're going to talk about the macro factors as opposed to our micro factors. So the micro factors are sort of the small and individual factors that change from company to company. The macro factors are overarching or broader factors that affect all businesses the same. The first one we're going to just take a quick look at is a general market. So when we talk about markets in fashion, it could be, divided up many different ways. For example, we could simply take the accessories market. Well, then I could break it down to say, shoes are typically accessories. Okay, fine, then we're in the shoe market. Well, there's a lot of different shoes. Let's take it down and go into the more athletic shoes. Knock off the high heels and the flip-flops and the sandals and all those were the athletic shoes. Okay, fine, but there's also a lot of, specified athletic shoes. Are they running shoes? Are they walking shoes? Are they cleats for soccer or golf? Are they, specialized in that manner? Are they general basketball sneakers? Are they, what are they? So again, we can kind of keep breaking down. But what we kind of have to realize is sort of every market that our company sits at, and the larger ones kind of spanning up from there. Over time, markets can change, so looking at demand of a changing market can affect how something is priced. For example, so let's take sneakers, okay? And again, these macro factors tend to change, and these overall market trends tend to change fairly slowly. But with fashion, trends changing is always relative. So sometimes these things can change wildly and fluctuate rapidly, but generally we're going to see slower kind of arcs and changes over longer periods of time. So if you take, sneakers back to when sneakers first started, they were really developed as a sort of revolutionary piece of sports technology. Before that, I don't even know what people were running around in. It probably wasn't comfortable. Boots, probably, to be quite honest. Ugh, that sounds terrible. And the first sneakers were leather, so I guess they weren't really that far off. But, the construction with the leather, the rubber sole, the lacing, all of this sort of built a sneaker. And it was invented, and it was rare and sought after. So at that point in the sort of sneaker market or athletic shoe market, it's very different. This is a new revolutionary, cutting edge technology. And so therefore it's going to be priced higher simply because when you have this sort of revolutionary new technology, there's very high demand, yet there's very low supply because there's probably one or only a few manufacturers that are even able to make such a product. So again, hopefully we all know this, but according to economics, when demand is high and supply of a product is low, you can charge a lot for your product. So you can price your products very, very high. Now, let's move down the road a little bit, and more people, more and more companies are jumping on the, hey, we know how to make sneakers, and we're learning how to make them cheaply. We're substituting the old leather for synthetic fabrics, which makes it cheaper. We're substituting the rubber from the soles with, again, synthetic materials, which makes it cheaper. We're able to get cheaper labor by going overseas. Again, this is not a revolutionary technology. It's so that sort of design and research is no longer associated with this product. It's more run-of-the-mill, easy to produce, easy to create, even cheap, and we can make a lot of it at one time. So we see the sneaker market moving away. So if we want to put a timeline on this, God, I forgot to Google when sneakers were invented. We'll do that just a minute, but it is early 1900s. But, around the 50s, 60s, even 70s, we're getting to the point where everybody knows how to make a sneaker. It's not so hard. We're even finding these cheaper strategies. We're able to mass produce them. And since it's not so new and revolutionary, it's been around for a very long time. Demand is going down, and costs are going down as the supply is rising. Now, of course, the market can always change, because let's fast forward a few decades to the future, really starting in maybe the late 70s, early 80s, where sneakers almost became like a cult thing. And this was really sort of the origin of the quote-unquote sneakerhead, where people got wildly enthusiastic about sneaker design, and this was sort of amplified by different other, subculture sections. So, Adidas being featured in rap videos, and different sports stars aligning with different shoe brands and shoe styles. There's the Michael Jordan, the Air Jordans. There was this sort of renaissance of shoe culture and interest in sneaker design. Again, the origin of your so-called sneakerhead, which has been continuing to evolve from there. So this sort of helped change the market back. So now, since we were at a sort of high supply, low demand, we're kind of changing the market around, where we're increasing demand for even more specific types of shoe, whether they be highly stylish, highly performance, so endorsed by a celebrity or an athlete, or becomes very, very specialized to a specific sport. So, and it depends on sort of the cachet of that sport. So again, basketball was huge in sort of the 80s and early 90s with the resurgence, with the, very much tied to Michael Jordan and his popularity. And so he launched the Air Jordan in tandem with Nike, and it was wildly successful and got people very excited about sneakers, along with, again, other different cultural factors that were bubbling up at the time. And that continues on today. We still see very popular basketball stars putting out shoes and working in tandem with Nike to put out their own shoe and things like that. And that increases the demand, again, for these sort of highly more specialized shoe. And it creates a sort of buzz and interest around the sneaker market in general, which, again, can allow the price to start to go up again. Because now, again, demand starts to rise again. And again, as demand rises, price can also be allowed to rise. So that's just sort of an overview of how a general market condition can change your pricing strategy for a particular product over time. And again, that's over about 100 years, those three sort of shifts. So again, they take a little bit longer, and they affect sort of all companies in its wake that are in that market. Also want to mention in macro factors pricing strategies, and the image over here is sort of doing an okay job at simplifying different pricing strategies, and we're going to pretty much go over these as well. So it's basically on a sliding scale over here. So reactivity of the supply chain, what does that mean? This means slow, this means fast. I don't know why they didn't just put that there. It would make more sense. So reactivity of the supply chain is basically how quickly can you go from idea or design generation, like basically from sketch to product. Over here again is a little bit slower, and here is very quickly. And of course, different companies will choose different modes, really just based on how they are able to produce their garments, how much goes into it, how fast they really can turn around these products. Some brands may purposefully do a slower supply chain kind of deal just to create a little bit more exclusivity, although that's very rare. Typically people try to go from design creation to actual product as quickly as they can, and again, depending on the needs of your garment and how your company runs, that will be different for every company. From here, the price goes from low to high. I guess you're just supposed to infer that by the direction of the arrow. And so basically in this whole low category, we have our low price or low price points, and we have sort of mass basic retailers, and over here on the slow supply chain sides, these are going to be sort of like your a lot of your retailers, kind of like your Macy's, but kind of a little bit more bargain, or at least like they're more generalized sections of clothing. Over here is your fast fashion retailers, and that's, of course, we're going to go into fast fashion more, but your H&M's, your Zara's, your Forever 21's, and things like that. And again, this basically just means that they're going to have clothes kicking around in stores longer than these guys over here. They're going to be creating their looks and supplying their stores a lot faster. This is basically in the middle, so this is just basically your average Joe fashion store. And then over here, the ones that, I don't know, the ones that get their stuff out quicker and the ones that don't. What can I say? And up here at top, we have our luxury brands, which is, of course, the top of our price point pyramid up here. And we have our sort of standard luxury brands and fashion designer brands. They're kind of the same thing. I guess these are just the ones that take a long time, and these are the ones that don't. So, okay, let's take a look a little bit more about the markup, as it sort of plays a big factor in the business models that we're going to go over after this. So the markup is pretty much, once we have the total production cost, how much we are going to increase that cost to reach our wholesale cost and our retail cost. So again, each fashion company's markup is different, and we'll take into consideration their unique position as well as a multitude of factors. However, there is a fairly standard model that can be seen commonly across most markets. So if you take everybody's strategy and average it out, this is basically what you get, and it is as follows. You take that total production cost that we calculated with the cost sheet, you times it by 2, and that's your wholesale cost. Your wholesale cost times 2 equals your retail cost. This means a design company will make back 200% of their total production cost per garment sold at wholesale and 400% at retail. Now, your company might not be selling directly at retail. Not all design companies will sell at retail. They sell to different retailers at the wholesale cost. A lot of design companies either, they might have like a web store or something like that, but that might be the only time that they're getting those 400% profits at the retail cost. Otherwise, they're getting all their profits from their wholesale prices. So they sell again to your retailers or to other distributors or things like that. So basically this breakdown means that a garment that was made for $20 will generate a profit of $20 when sold for $40 at wholesale and $60 when sold at $80 at retail. So this means, of course, this was how much we cost to make it. So this is us in the red. But when we sell it at $40, we're making $20 back. Because we have to fill this hole before we pile anything on top of it. So at retail, we're selling it at $80. Again, we have to fill a hole of $20 before we can get profit. So we take $20 away from $80 and get $60 profit at retail. So let's look at some low and high markups. So that was the standard middle of the road markup model. But of course, there are many fashion businesses that experiment and are successful with alternative markup strategies. The king of the low markup is the fast fashion model. These are some examples of fast fashion companies. And it basically is a brief summary of their business model, so that you can read over them. But again, they focus highly on high turnover, so they're making collections as quickly as they can, as cheaply as they can, and they use very low markups. Now, their whole model is based around, the fast fashion is creating these garments very, very quickly and very, very cheaply. And again, selling them with low markups. All of that combined creates a store atmosphere where people are always enticed to come in because there are always new collections being displayed. And they're very encouraged to buy because the costs are so low. So how can using a low markup, because of course the lower the markup for a garment means a smaller amount of profit per garment. So if I have a garment with a low markup, I'm making less profit per garment than a garment with a high markup. However, this, and fast fashion sure has shown us this example. If we price things with a low markup, they're at a lower cost to the customer, and this will cause the customer to buy more garments. So, for example, on how fast fashion works and why using narrow, thin markups works and actually has created a business model which has produced some of the biggest fashion design world billionaires we've seen in this generation, much, much more than a lot of our luxury models, let's face it, is this. So imagine a dress with $20 production costs. So it costs $20 in materials, labor, design, marks, services, whatever, shipping. Altogether, that dress costs us $20 to put on the market. Okay? If we price that dress for $100, we may sell 50 units. Not bad. It'll equal, for us, $5,000 in revenue and $4,000 in profit. So the revenue is just what we make selling it for $100. That's 50 times 100 equals $5,000 in revenue. Now the $4,000 considers that we are only making $80 profit per unit, not 100. So that would be $400,000 in profits. Now take that same dress, still with a $20 production cost, and let's slash its value and price it at $50 instead of $100. What a deal. Drastically lower markup. Now instead of making $80 in profit per garment, we're only making $30. However, because it's so much less expensive, this is going to encourage our customers to buy more. And instead of 50 units being sold, we're going to sell 200 units. Oh, very good. So now our revenue equals $10,000 and we're making $6,000 in profit. So we took the same outfit with the same production cost, implemented two different pricing strategies, and actually ended up making more by selling it at less. Fast fashion. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have luxury fashion. Now, the luxury fashion model encompasses very high markups. And this really relates a lot to its, the brand strategy and the brand identity. They need to be exclusive. So they don't want everyone and, their brother going out and buying and wearing their clothing. If they priced it low so everyone can afford to do that, they lose the exclusivity value add to their brand. And again, when we see this sort of thing, this is their value add again is we can provide you an exclusive product. And it is, only for, the richest, most high class, sort of best, I shouldn't say best, they'll say best. It's their brand offering. So they cannot have low costs. Low costs would be counterintuitive to this sort of brand identity. Okay? So let's take a look at some of what the a luxury company will offer and how it sort of works into their overall success as a company. Now, all of these products have high markups, but let's take a look at them individually. And I sort of categorized vast offerings into three more narrow groups. The first one being couture and designer lines. Okay? So, these are a giant loss for luxury fashions. No one makes money putting on a glamorous, elaborate fashion show. Nobody. Oh my God. The production costs for a couture fashion show are through the roof. And then you have to invite all these glamorous celebrities, which won't come unless you wine and dine them with gifts and put them up and blah, 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 blah. Then you have to pay for the models. And then, oh my God, you have to make these incredible works of art out of extraordinary materials using world-class craftsmen. It is so expensive. And if you've probably noticed, they're not the most wearable things in the world. And that's because we've sort of abandoned couture and fashion show lines being wearable. That's not what they're for. They're not to sell clothing. They're there to establish brand credibility. So could you be a luxury company and say that you're an exclusive and, a favorite of the rich, glamorous celebrities if you didn't have a highly elaborate, exclusive fashion show that you can show in different websites, and you can have the paparazzi snap pictures of the celebrities coming and going from your fashion show and be in all the coverage associated with fashion weeks for different cities and things like that. It is basically a giant spectacle in which to, again, establish sort of your aesthetic and credibility as a luxury brand. The garments are wildly expensive, even for even considering the fact that they are one of a kind works of arts. They are priced astronomically. A few of them do get sold. However, even if every garment got sold, it would really not even make up the money that was spent not only on the creation of the clothes, but on all of the production that revolves around putting together the fashion show and the design that goes into it. Obviously, these are very well paid designers. They're elaborate. The design cost as well is huge for this. I mean, all the costs are huge and the markets are huge, but just simply because the production costs are so huge, it can't simply begin to try to make up for make a profit, and they do across the board. All luxury fashions companies lose money on their very exclusive designer lines as well as their couture lines. I read somewhere that I think the only luxury brand that at least makes back the money in their couture line, basically makes back the production cost of putting out their couture line, is Chanel. And I can understand that. Out of all the couture lines, they tend to be the most wearable. And apparently they provide very good customer service to their couture customers, so who knows. In the middle here, we have retail stores, other licenses associated with a brand that may cater to somewhat lower price point offerings. Now, this is a relative lower. Usually when you go into a designer retail store or look at a designer section, they are not cheap. They are just simply not couture priced, which would run upwards of $1 million a dress, if not more. So these are still high price items and high markups as well. And again, this is another way to add or establish your brand as being exclusive. So again, these two are very similar. You have to have the slick Fifth Avenue flagship store where people can sort of look into the window and long at the clothing. You can even go in and until you look at a price point, even feel a little good, like you're gonna get something, or maybe you can work and save up and save and get one thing. But again, that's the idea they want to maintain. They don't want to simply just cut their costs, even if they could make more money in their retail section by cutting the markups. Why? Again, it's still to establish the exclusivity of these brands. They would rather sell fewer garments and remain that brand that people reach for, the brand that people long for, the brand that is exclusive, the brand of wealth. They'd rather maintain that status than cut their costs and go with lower markups. And that even means that a lot of these retail stores lose money. Most of them will kind of even itself out. A lot of times different brands will license out different price points. So what is a license? we'll talk maybe a little bit more about licenses and fashion companies, and companies in general, where we'll take a look at Ralph Lauren, because he's really the king of licenses. He built up that model. But what a brand will do is they're basically almost outsource different labels to different companies, and they'll rent the ability, like the license is pretty much like renting the ability to exist under the overarching brand name. So say a brand will have maybe a license here that's it's even a little bit under designer, it might be in bridge price point, and another company will design it for them, and they might be have to adhere to certain aesthetic principles, quality standards, things like that to be able to use the name. But in essence, the main company is separate from that license, which again is very great for the company, because they're just taking money from this other company that wants to use their brand name. But again, if that brand name had not established exclusivity or aligned themselves properly with luxury or whatever it is, no one would be trying to get a license, or no one would be paying them for a license. And this can also create a lot of different problems with fashion brands too. So because they're not under direct creative control from the parent brand, brands run into risk of what's called diluting or damaging their brand. So if their license does something that is not great, it can start to erode what that brand has worked really hard to establish. So, Kate, where do luxury companies make their money if they're not making it off clothing? Well, that brings us to our last category over here. Our low price point items, relatively. Again, a lot of these items are still, sold for quite a bit of money, and quite a bit of money over what you might pay for a wallet or a belt or some perfume, but still a lot less than $1 million couture dress. This might only be $100. And usually people can scrounge together $100 with enough saving over time. So this is sort of the in. These small, low-price items are the biggest sellers a luxury brand will have. So again, it's perfumes and typically small goods. It could be small accessories, small leather goods like wallets, like belts, even. Here's a good example that was popular. When was it popular? Maybe about 15 years ago to 10 years ago. Tiffany's came out with this silver keychain. Oh, it was perfect because it was associated with the luxury jewelry shop of Tiffany's, but it was sold at a low cost. Everyone wanted one. So again, the markups on these guys are still high. However, they still need to be high. All of these things need to be expensive relative to their own markets, because again, that establishes themselves as exclusive. But since these guys are lower on a whole, they're still affordable to a more wide-ranging audience. So again, many more people, if they want a piece of the Chanel lifestyle, good luck saving up $1 million for a dress, but you can probably save up $100 for some perfume. Similar with other smaller accessories. You can save up a little bit more to get a taste of this luxury, a taste of this exclusivity. And again, since they spent so much time and so much money establishing this exclusivity and pretty much portraying themselves as a brand to be desired, a brand to be reached for, people are going to do it. People are going to reach and stretch and try and strive and save for these things. And now, since they're selling so many of these, again at a high markup, they're making wild amounts of profit off these things. So let's just take a minute. I want to highlight perfume in this whole sort of soliloquy. Perfume, oh my goodness. Basically, all luxury fashion houses exist to sell perfume. Nothing else. Everything else is just a sort of prop and advertising to sell their perfume. Why, you might ask? Well, a thing like perfume is so much different than clothing because clothing has to be designed and redesigned and continually made and continually researched. Perfume can pretty much be developed once and sold year after year, season after season. So it doesn't have this repeat design cost that clothing does. Same with the bottle. You do it once, formulate the chemicals, promote it, and there it stays. I mean, they're still selling Chanel No. 5. They've been selling Chanel No. 5 for decades at this point, maybe even almost a century at this point, maybe exactly a century at this point. We should check it out, because every woman alive loves Chanel No. 5. Anyway, so once you have that basically one-time development cost, design cost for the smell in the bottle and the blah blah blah, throw some advertising to it. That's your only continual cost, is the advertising. Take into production cost. So if you take materials and labor cost, minus of course your design cost, because that will, degrade over time since you only really need to do it once. This here, strip away the fancy label, is a small glass bottle filled with chemical water. Well, it doesn't cost that much money to make a glass bottle, especially a small one, and it costs even less to fill it with some chemical water. That chemical water is not expensive. It's not expensive at all. The total production cost, or let's say, production cost. Let's say production cost minus design cost, which again will deteriorate over time, because there's probably no one actually physically making this. This is probably all made by an automated factory system. Designs the bottles are made and filled and labeled and packed all by machines. So there's not even any human labor cost really associated with it. Maybe, packing and shipping. But so you really only have the materials cost, which may cost matters of cents per bottle. But how much they market it for. This bottle could be very well $100. But if it only took $1 to make, that's $99 in profit. That's insane. And that is so highly profitable, that it is the cash cow that allows luxury fashion companies to exist. So much so that there have been stories of luxury brands existing and dying based on the popularity of their perfume. So, popular designer in the 90s, Donna Karan, she had initial wild success, got great reviews from all the critics and industry newspapers and things like that, and launched this designer, very New York centric design label, luxury design label, backed by I forget their names, but some hotshot Japanese investors, and so she got a ton of money to basically build this whole brand, and it was looking really good, and again, she's an excellent designer, no one doubted that, and she knew how to produce a great product. However, she really was sitting over here in this midterm, and she knew at one point she had to do the perfume, and it was a sort of a series. I'll try to research it and maybe come back with a little addendum to this, but it was basically a failed launch of a perfume that shut down her brands, because without this cash cow backing the luxury brand, it cannot exist. And basically, just long story short, what happened to her is, I don't know, there's a lot of critique of the sort of scent. She's like, I wanted, the back of my boyfriend's neck in a cashmere sweater, or something corny like that. And it was sort of an inspiration that was just too personal. It wasn't widely acceptable to a customer base. It wasn't very exclusive too. It was kind of soft and intimate. It wasn't aligned with her more sort of severe luxury, very urban, kind of New York, almost gritty almost, but still very luxurious, urban chic in a way. It kind of felt a little bit off of that. And then they didn't do a lot of, they didn't put a lot of effort into the sort of product design of the bottle and even the smell. It didn't smell so great. And then what really killed it is they really didn't advertise it very well. Because of course, I think she sort of got caught up in the ideas, I'm a designer, I'm a clothing designer, why is this is auxiliary. But in the end, because she couldn't establish her fragrance for DKNY, her main, luxury fashion lines really kind of went bust because she didn't have that highly profitable item supporting all other aspects of the brand. So again, super big. And different companies will choose different products. If you can choose perfume, that's great. Gucci chooses belts, Fendi chooses wallets, that's Louis Vuitton. But you're going to be known for a thing, and whatever your thing is, that cheap item that people are going to reach to sort of identify with your brand, do that. And again, it's important to sort of make your own. So of course we can't all be making perfume, so maybe we can be making belts and wallets again, which are fairly cheap to make. They're small, they don't have a lot of material cost. Mostly you're paying for the logo, the flashy logo, not the materials, not the construction or anything else. And that's where the high markups come from, make them very, very profitable. So, in conclusion, when we are finding the final wholesale and retail cost of a garment, we have to take into a multitude of factors. Of course, the total production cost is probably the most important factor, but we're also going to consider the sort of value proposition that we're proposing to our customer, the customer segmentation, or how much our customer in specific is willing to pay for our clothing, current market trends that can affect sort of the overarching prices that are occurring in our market, competition pricing. I didn't actually mention competition pricing yet. I'll just sort of stuck it in here at the end. So obviously every fashion company unfortunately has some sort of competition, and fashion companies and all companies will look very closely at how their closest competitor is pricing their goods, and ideally we're going to try to undercut our competition in pricing if we can. If not, if we can't do that, then we know that we have to add value other places to justify the higher cost of the garment. Then of course we're also going to consider pricing and markup strategies based on our business model. So are we going to choose a low markup strategy, a high markup strategy, or standard, or what are we going to do? So when we consider all of these different factors, roll them all into one, we finally get the wholesale and retail cost of a garment. Whew. Again, that was seems a lot, but again, pricing a product is very, very important to any business model, and it's very, very important to us as designers. And even though these sort of pricing and businessy and economic kind of jargon and even marketing kind of jargon can tend to be a bit dull for us as designers, we'd rather just be creating and leave all that stuff to the accountants. It's important for us to think about because again, unfortunately, well, fortunately too, because we always want to make money, but we're not creating art, we're creating a product within a company. So we always must view our designs in this